final moment.
A wonderful and pleasant good morning to you, Madam Speaker, and of course to all of Trinidad and Tobago who are listening. Madam Speaker, decades ago, people who used to make hats were very fashionable. People who used to make hats worked with a lot of what we now know as dangerous chemicals, such as mercury and lead and so on.
Correct.
And these chemicals would seep into their body and cause damage to their system. And they would often display symptoms such as tremors, memory loss, a certain kind of incoherence. And so the term mad as a hatter came about. And I was just so reminded when the member for San Fernando West was on his feet.
Mad.
He seems to be displaying the behavior that led to the term mad as a hatter. Madam Speaker,
Steel hatters.
the member said that the UNC says to leave everything unmanaged. What madness. He also spoke about the San Fernando waterfront project, and he gave some descriptions, and he said about something being done in 2 months. It has been 9 years, and the project is still not off the ground. In 2015, in the PNM manifesto, that is what they had a whole stack game changers. Up to now, the game ain't changed. And that was the first game changer, and it has not been implemented. And I feel sorry for San Fernando West, because he should be ashamed as the elected MP for that constituency, where the PNM government that he is a part of has failed the people of San Fernando West. He should be ashamed, and he probably is. He probably is, but he wouldn't say so. Madam Speaker, the member for Sando West also spoke about the property tax being proclaimed in 2010. Madam Speaker, the Property Tax Act was passed by the government led by Patrick Manning. And in fact, it was one of the reasons the PNM was voted out and Kamla Prasad Bisesa became Prime Minister. In the Act, in fact, in Section 2 of the Act, the proclamation date was January 1st, 2010. And it was subsequent to that. All that time who was in government? It was the PNM was in government, and they proclaimed the Property Tax Act. And it was when they were voted out, and a Kamla Prasad Bisesa government came, we repealed the Property Act. Sorry. Please. It was when the member for Superior became Prime Minister that the UNC government got rid of that onerous PNM Property Tax Act, and we will do it again after the next general election. Madam Speaker, the member for San Fernando West, I know he served as Attorney General before, and he would have jumped to the issue of the Sex Offenders Registry. And I just want to correct the record, because in the Hatter's rant, he spoke about the UNC objecting to the Sex Offenders Registry. I want to put it on record. It was the UNC who raised the issue of a Sex Offenders Registry. And we called for the PNM to bring the law to Parliament. In fact, we spoke about it for 7 years, and the PNM did nothing. And the member for Sando West was also the Attorney General at that time. And then they finally brought it. And we asked them to make the registry public, and they refused. And you know what? A whole 1 year later, they had to make the Sex Offenders Registry public. Had they listened to the UNC, they would not have had all that drama. So I just want to set the record straight.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, there's no secret about my passion for local government, having served as a councillor for 10 years and being appointed to chair the Tunapuna Piako Corporation at the time and I probably still hold the record as the youngest person ever to be elected as a chairman of a corporation. And I served at a time when the party that I was a part of was in government, and it was performance, performance, performance. I know of the potential of local government, And when I hear, excuses being made, I feel really sad, because I feel for our local government representatives who are the first arm of government out there to the people. The member for Sando West has really proven to be a very absentee, very uninvolved, very disconnected person who has been given the responsibilities for local government and regional corporations. He has the gift of gab, I will give him that, but not much else. People need performance, not all talk. And when the member was appointed, when he was, some said demoted, but from Attorney General, but when he was appointed as the minister with the responsibilities for local government, I cautioned the member very early that pocket squares don't fix potholes and PR don't pave roads. So the member have been long on promises but very short on delivery. There's a string of broken promises from this minister, and it really is made worse, Madam Speaker, with that bravado that he comes with in Parliament and outside, when he speaks as though everything is wonderful. I know blue skies ahead, and we know the reality on the ground. So a little caution. The fact is that the government is having trouble with revenue. They are having issues with performance. They are underperforming. And a little humility when you go to the regional corporations, might earn you a little goodwill out there. But don't come to tell people that the skies are blue and they're seeing dark clouds ahead. Madam Speaker, part of the problem for this government, the member for San Fernando West spoke about the issue of revenue generation and transfer pricing. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance promised legislation for transfer pricing in every one of his last 9 budgets. Every one, including this one. And while this country is having serious issues with money because of transfer pricing issues, we are now facing issues with the energy companies because of this government's failure to bring transfer pricing legislation. And this is an area of significant loss of income for this country. And, Madam Speaker, if the Minister of Finance had done what he was supposed to do, this government wouldn't have to be relying on property tax to force citizens to pay through their nose for what should be afforded to them by the state. Madam Speaker, one of the great promises as well from this government from 2015 has been local government reform. I don't know how much to talk about it again, because I am all getting fed up of the promises, the mama guy, the whole talk. The Minister of Local Government spoke about a process going to be involved in putting in full-time municipal executives. He talked about the mayors and the body corporations getting executive councils that will look like cabinet, and they will be similar to THA secretaries. They will be called secretaries, and you will give them the full-time opportunity. And today he comes to say, well, you can't really follow the THA model. So 9 years later, you're pulling back. And I'm saying, had you thought this thing out? You spoke about giving the CEOs that power like a permanent secretary to give them the ability to hire for themselves. And you know what is happening now? I will speak later on how the ministry is forcing regional corporations to hire persons that they sent. They hire people, send them to the corporation, and the corporations have to pay them. And you spoke about allowing corporations to hire people.
Member, this is not a personal conversation between you and the member for San Fernando West. This is really a conversation this week. Okay, so if you're referencing the minister, please do in accordance with the standing orders, please.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, it was the government who proposed that the regional corporations will have this authority, and they have failed. They spoke about executive councils. You know what they also spoke about? Well, Madam Speaker, they spoke about extending the term of office from 3 years to 4 years. We know that it was the only section of the act that they proclaimed, and the purpose behind it, of course, was to postpone the local government election. But thanks to a very vigilant opposition, we were able to go to court and have elections on time. They promised increase for councillors' salaries. Well, of course, all councillors, both PNM and UNC, were very happy. But to date, Madam Speaker, nothing has happened. There was a Newsday article speaking during the debate in Parliament to adopt the report on the JSC. On that bill, the Minister of Finance proposed for local government representatives to be paid more fairly under the new law. And I want to quote the Minister. He said, "And for the first time, they will get what they receive." Madam Speaker, 2 years later, nothing has changed. I want to remind the population that the act passed by the government on local government reform gives the power to the Minister of Finance to determine how much councillors will be paid and what their other allowances will be. I want to tell the population that councillors currently have a stipend of $4,360 per month. Per month. And this heartless government has made promises, and this is a section of the act that they could proclaim, they could pass, and the power is really in their hands now. Not to rely and throw the blame on the Salary Review Commission, but for the Minister of Finance to use his power in the act. And he said he would have done it. He said, and he has failed. Madam Speaker, local government councillors currently get a traveling allowance of $1,860 for the entire month. This government has sent up the price of fuel once, twice, 3 times, and we are riot yet. But the traveling allowance, just given the cost of fuel now, should also be increased for local government representatives. Madam Speaker, most traveling officers in the public service, as well as elected MPs, are given tax exemptions for vehicles. A vehicle is perhaps one of the greatest tools of a local government councillor, because you have to be visiting problems, issues, complaints, people. You must be active and available and accessible, and your vehicle is the thing to take you there. And I feel that councillors should have that tax exemption and access to vehicle loans for all councillors across the board. And all of these things, Madam Speaker, fall within the remit of the Minister of Finance, because the government gave him that power, and it is for them to deliver. So I am calling on the government to proclaim the section of the act that has already been passed by Parliament, and do fair and good by our local government councillors who are out there giving service. Madam Speaker, I want to move now to another aspect of councillors' performance in terms of their secretarial staff. For the first time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, councillors were given secretarial staff, an office, and a $1,000 incidental towards their office under the government led by the member for Siparia, Kamla Prasad Bisesa. Madam Speaker, it was created based on a cabinet note during that 2010 to 2015 term in office. And we came to Parliament earlier this year when the government increased the minimum wage to bring to the attention of government that the secretaries for councillors currently work for a stipend of $2,800 a month. Well, it's $3,000, and by the time they take out NIS and health surcharge and so on, they go home with $2,800. We indicated that if you work 8 hours a day, you work 40 hours a week, or 160 hours a month on average. That comes up to $3,600, which is the minimum wage currently. And the member for San Fernando West stood here in response to a motion from the opposition and promised that he will do what is necessary, the legal necessity, to ensure that the councillors' secretaries are not getting less than minimum wage. You know, to date, that has not changed. What? To date, councillors' secretaries are being paid below minimum wage. And what it requires is a cabinet note or a legal mechanism to discard the current cabinet note that gave life to these positions, and they could be put under the regional corporations and paid similar to what a clerk in the regional corporation is paid. So it is something very simple, and I am so disappointed in the member for San Fernando West that we have come here months later and councillors' secretaries being employed are getting less than minimum wage in this country. And in the meanwhile, they have come, so right now, CPAP workers are getting more money and URP workers more money than councillors' secretaries. So it is a simple thing that should be fixed. Mr. Minister, and I look forward to that. We also have the situation with the councillors' offices. Madam Speaker, the cabinet note I mentioned before gave birth to state-paid offices for local government councillors. Madam Speaker, that happened in 2010. Since that, you have had a tremendous increase in the price, cost of living, and so on. You have had property tax being introduced. The allocations to these offices is, I think, $2,500 per month, but it really could barely pay to get an office space. You could get a little room and a little connoque, as they say. And depending on the type of area, if it is a more built-up area, it is much more difficult to get a space for that price. Councillors have been evicted under this PNM government because they have not been even giving the releases to pay for the rent. And they are also not getting the incidentals. You know what they get, Madam Speaker? $1,000. And when their rent allowance is $2,500, and they get a space for $3,000, they take $500 from the incidentals and put towards the rent. You know what the incidentals have to cover? A phone for the office, ink for the printer, stationery. They have to pay their light bill if it's not included in the rent. They have to pay for little things like cleaning supplies, water, coffee, tea, and so on for their office, with $1,000 a month. So I'm saying, Mr. Minister, these are simple things that could be fixed, and I am pleading with you, if you really care for local government practitioners, the minister would increase the remuneration for councillors, the traveling allowance for councillors, the secretaries' salaries would not be below minimum wage, and you will fix the allowance given the incidentals for each of them. Madam Speaker, our local government councillors are the first line of duty outside there. And under this government, their duties have become more onerous. Because of the neglect of this government, when you have bad roads, they call on their councillor. When you have flooding, because of government neglect, they call on their councillor. When you have no water, if I have enough time, I will deal with member for San Lopino Bonner West who spoke before. But when councillors have burgesses who are not getting water in the pipe, they make requests for truck-borne water. Truck-borne water to regional corporations is really meant for areas that do not have pipe-borne supply, that do not have pipe-borne infrastructure. And where there is a pipe-borne supply and customers are supposed to get truck-borne supply from WASA, when WASA constantly fails them, they call on the corporations. And the measly water trucking allowance that they have, the minister could tell you, it is used up very early. And then they have to go begging, cap in hand again. So you also have, Madam Speaker, the responsibilities for maintenance of schools. Under the previous Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, there was a memo, a directive given that all regional corporations will assist in schools when it comes to doing minor repairs, maintaining the compound, and so on. Mind you, they didn't get any additional money for that. So they are now using out of their allocation for other things to see about schools. When every day you have a sewer system erupting in a school, it is the regional corporation's one sewer cesspool truck that has to deal with it, and sometimes the truck is not even working. And that means that burgesses are now deprived of this service because the Ministry of Local Government, of Education, is failing in terms of the upkeep and maintenance of schools. When you have crime and security running security issues, facilities that fall under the remit of the regional corporations are vulnerable to vandalism. We have had a child being shot and killed on a recreation ground in Central. My colleague for Shoguanas East, one of her constituents. And when we see that those type of things happening where it's supposed to be a safe space, we have to ensure that our municipal police are properly equipped to go out there. The member for San Fernando West and his government has been promising 100 new municipal police officers for every regional corporation, totaling 1,400 officers. Since 2015, this was promised to materialize at the end of 2016. Today, he has come here to tell us that he has 500 new officers. You have not reached your promise, something you promised to complete by 2016, another blatant failure. And Madam Speaker, during the standing finance, I could probably better request, but I want to ask the Minister if he could provide for us a breakdown of the number of municipal officers hired and which regional corporations they have been assigned to. I understand municipal police officers are being assigned to a place in Cedros that falls under the Ministry of Youth Development. Municipal police officers, you have not recruited the amount you promised. The regional corporations are short staff where municipal police are concerned, and they're sending them elsewhere. I think you need to account better for that where that is concerned. Madam Speaker, we have several roads falling under the Ministry of Works and Transport. In this country, the highways are not the only roads that fall under the Highways Division. Many of my colleagues on this side represent areas that are considered rural. When you have the Naparima-Mayaro Road, you have the Manzanilla Road, you have several major roads that fall under the Ministry of Works that are in such condition. When you go there, Madam Speaker, and you're driving, you could swear you are in the movie The Chronicles of Narnia. When you see things falling and landslips and so on, it is just an out of this world. And that is the Chronicles of the PNM, where road maintenance is concerned. When, Madam Speaker, the minister fails in his duty, the regional corporations now have to take their meager resources and go to fix these roads. And you know what they have to do? Neglect the local roads that they are actually responsible for. And then they get the blame, you know. The corporations get the blame. And the minister as well has been partially responsible for blaming corporations. Madam Speaker, when it comes to local tourism, members opposite talk about tourism. Local tourism sites fall under the regional corporations. They're barely getting money to patch potholes on the main roads, much less to maintain the roads leading to these tourist sites. Some of the tourist sites, Madam Speaker, that have been, you have areas in Mayaro, you have, I remember the road to the Devil's Woodyard, Mud Volcano, which falls in the Princestown region, that was impassable for years. And what happens is that people who want to go Mayaro in Kernaham village and buy a watermelon on the side of the road, support our local farmers. If you want to go for roast fish in Mayaro, if you want to go to the Marakta Lake in Maruga, if you want to go to these places, you want to go to Lopino, you have to traverse the roads that are terrible, one. But what happens is that when we, as citizens, visit these local tourist sites, we give support to local vendors, craftsmen, people who sell snow cone, alu pies, I mentioned roast fish, but even craft and art and so on, and hats. you give support to micro entrepreneurs. And members talk about small and micro entrepreneurs. But if you are not providing the road network for people to go there, then your vendors and your small and micro entrepreneurs will not be getting any sale. So you have been damaging local economic development. You have been damaging the same SMEs that the Minister of Trade came here and spoke about. They speak about these things and boast, Madam Speaker, on paper. It is on paper. It is in shiny magazines. But when you go into the communities, in Cedros, in Point Fortin, remember for Point Fortin stepped out? You go in, even in Toko, Matlot, when you go to those areas, the fishing village of Toko, I mean, the member for Toko, Sandy Grande, I hope he says something good for those people on the East Coast, because those are areas that are being tremendously impacted negatively by the government. And you know what saddens me? Members opposite who represent those areas, they don't even speak for their neglected constituents. They don't. Because if they are to give true representation of the people in their area, it would be an indictment on this government. But Madam Speaker, there are people all over who vote for the UNC, so we will speak on their behalf. Madam Speaker, the member last year spoke about a local app. Member for San Fernando West, he said that the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, and they launched this app on June 12th, 2024. And the purpose of the app was to report issues, right? So you're reporting complaints. Madam Speaker, our local government councillors have cell phones, they have offices, there's the regional corporations, there's the Ministry of Local Government. You see complaints? There is no shortage of complaints. You see ways of getting complaints to the ears of those who could act, there's no shortage of that. What there is a shortage of is solutions. So while I hear the boast of the app and the app and the app, last year I called him the app man, you know. But I wouldn't do that this year.
Not the Aquaman.
The app was just another tool to highlight and to bring complaints. It's the same complaints you're getting, but it does not address the shortfalls in local government. It doesn't. So I want to hear about an app that will deliver. And I feel that app is named UNC. Madam Speaker, another failure has been, and in this pattern of mismanagement, has been the Secondary Roads Rehabilitation and Improvement Company. $100 million was first allocated to the Ministry of Local Government for a company that was not yet formed. The next year in the budget, that company got an additional $100 million, and the company subsequently was shifted to the Ministry of Works and Transport. So again, demotion from a partner, well, demotion for the member for San Fernando West, but you have $200 million being given to deal with secondary roads. You have thousands of secondary roads all over this country in terrible condition, and you can't deliver? So it was removed from the Ministry of Local Government and given to the Ministry of Works. I know what we have over there now? We have audits, and we have claims of price fixing, corruption after corruption, and roads not being paved. So, Madam Speaker, this is another area of poor delivery and wastage of government money. That $200 million that went to that secondary roads company could have gone to the regional corporations for them to fix their business and fix their roads. You talk about empowering regional corporations, you are giving them less money. Regional corporations never get $200 million for secondary roads. Why didn't you assign that money to the regional corporations for them to perform and deliver? That is what should have been done. Madam Speaker, I am calling for a full investigation into that secondary roads company and the $200 million that seem to have gone into thin air. Madam Speaker, in the last budget, the Minister of Rural Development, in fact, he made front page in The Guardian, The headline was 200% increase in funding for local government. Well, everybody got excited. But you see these yellow books here, Madam Speaker? You see these? Well, I can't display them, right? But these yellow books, these have the facts. These books tell us where the government is trying to pull wool over our eyes. Let me tell you how they came up with 200% increase. They have a line item, was recently introduced in these books, called property tax, under rates and taxes. And in that, in every regional corporation, they put a certain amount of money because they said this was going to be revenue they will collect for the regional corporations. Arima borrow 8 million, Shoguanas borrow 14 million, Kuva Tabakit 14 million, Diego Martin 14 million, Mayaro 8 million, Pinal Debe 12 million, Point Fortin 8 million, Port of Spain 8 million, Princestown 8 million, San Fernando City 12 million, Sawa Lavantil 12 million, San Fernando 8 million, Siparia Borough 8 million, Tunapuna Piaco 14 million, a total of $150 million allocated in 2024 to regional corporations, a promise. In this year's budget, Madam Speaker, we saw the revised estimates. Well, you know they didn't collect on property tax. So they went and revised the estimates, and they seem to have cut everything across the board and give them 10% of what the original estimate was. They put that as the revised estimate. So it boiled down to $15.2 million. Has the government collected $15.2 million in property tax? I don't think they have. So why are you doing the regional corporations that? Why are you mamagaing them? This year, though, the mamagai continues, but it gets worse. Because last year you boiled down, and this year now they have continued. Arima borrow 7 million, Shoguanas borrow 11 million, Kuva Tabaki 12 million, Diego Martin 11 million, Mayaro 7 million, Pinal Debe 7 million, Port of Spain Corporation 7 million, Princestown 7 million, San Fernando 9 million, Sawa Lavantil 9 million, Sandy Grande 7 million, Siparia Borough 7 million, Tunapuna Piaco 11 million, totaling $125 million under property tax. Again, a promise that is just poof up in the air. So they have allocated on paper a total of $275 million to regional corporations that turn out to just be pie in the sky. So that is how they're inflating. But you know what they also do, Madam Speaker? They give the regional corporations money under other heads now, where they actually are supposed to get releases. So regional corporations are statutory bodies. The Ministry of Finance will release the money to the Ministry of Local Government, who in turn will release the money to the statutory bodies that fall under them, including regional corporations, CPEP, RDC, and some other special purpose companies. When time comes, the regional corporation will do estimates for their projects and send a request for funds. They ask you to confirm that are getting this money. The regional corporations will receive a confirmation of funds from the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Local Government. And on that authority, the CEO, which is the Chief Accounting Officer of the regional corporation, can now engage in a contract with suppliers, with people who pave in roads and so on. This government has had requests from funds coming from the regional corporations for their development projects. They give them confirmation of funds. They went ahead and signed contracts with contractors, and work started. And then you know what they come and said? Procurement. Oops, you know what? We're not going to give you this money again. We want you to tell us when your project is complete, and we will pay the contractor. I want to warn that two things are happening here. The ministry is now insisting that they are not releasing money that they previously confirmed to the corporation will be released. The regional corporation, as a legal entity, signed a contract with a company to do work, whether it is paving or any other work in their community. and they have a legal obligation to pay that contractor once work is finished. The ministry now should release that money to the regional corporation if the contractor is not completed and he's not ready to be paid. They will have the money committed on the book so that whenever the contract is paid, they could pay, when the contract is complete, they will pay the contractor. As it is now, the regional corporations have engaged contractors to do millions of dollars in work, and the Ministry of Local Government has refused to release the money to the regional corporations. I am calling on the minister today to release the monies for development projects to the regional corporation. And I don't think you should tell us about last year and next year, because what they are telling them now is that these projects that you haven't paid for, don't worry, you will pay for them next year, out of next year's allocation, which we are debating now. And what that means is that they will not be able to do any new projects in the new financial year. They are depriving the regional corporations. They are taking away their autonomy. You promised autonomy for them. And here you are now refusing to give them the money that we debate and pass this in Parliament, Madam Speaker. This House approved that these corporations get this money, and to use the procurement legislation as an excuse to not give them this money, I find it very unfair. Very unfair. But you know what that does? It allows the ministry to expend less money. So they just don't give them their money, and they come and report it as a savings. So they're saving money. And in the meanwhile, flood till we waste in bamboo.
Oh, Lord.
Literally.
Till we waste.
All over this country, you have instances of places that the regional corporations could provide relief in terms of drainage projects, bridges, in terms of repairs of roads, recreation grounds, and so on. You know what else they do, Madam Speaker? Very recently, this is a memo from the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Rural Development, dated September 2nd, 2024. And the subject is Transfer of Funds, Recurrent and Development Program 2024, Head 42, Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. And this is where the Ministry of Local Government requested an approval was given by the Minister of Finance for the transfer of funds in the sum of $43,622,300 from within the Ministry of Rural Development from various regional corporations. And it goes $36.6 million to CPEP and $7 million to RDC, the National Reforestation Program. And you know where the money coming from, Madam Speaker? Every corporation, it has Port of Spain, Arima, Shagona, Sawa, Lavantil, Sandy Grande, Cuva, Tabakit, Mayaro, Separia, Pinal, Debi. If I didn't call one, it's because it's not here. Here where they're taking the money from. Money to develop recreation facilities. Money for computerization program. Money for local government reform. Money for municipal police station and municipal police vehicles. They are taking money for drainage and irrigation.
Drainage?
They are taking money for disaster management. They are taking money to fix markets and abattoirs. Madam Speaker, several corporations, they are taking money that they use for local government reform and municipal police vehicles. And then they want to know why the regional corporations cannot deliver. Because the same money you're giving with your right hand, you're taking away with your left hand.
Good point.
$43 million taken away from the regional corporations by a memo dated the 2nd of September, just before the end of the financial year. My question now, I don't talk about the abuse to the corporations where you're taking back the money. What are you doing with $36.6 million to CPEP? In the second week of the last month of the financial year, What are they going to spend that money on before the 30th of September 2024? What have they spent this money on? I would like the government to answer that. I would like them to tell us what the reforestation and watershed program, $7 million, how they're going to spend that in 2 weeks. Because it would take some time for them to release and so on, when the regional corporation has not been able to get the money for an entire year. And you have, Madam Speaker, amidst all this allocation, new money, millions going to CPEP, you have allegations of corruption at the CPEP company. You have several newspaper articles. Time may not allow me to go in to all of them, but questions are being raised about decisions regarding these allocations, about political work being done, about the use of CPEP in marginal constituencies, CPEP and the reforestation program in marginal constituencies, and the use of it for campaign financing. So, Madam Speaker, the PNM always talk about campaign finance. Up to now, they can't bring campaign finance laws. But if they do that, they will have to account for self-help grants that they give in marginal constituencies, particularly when there is a by-election like in Lengua Indian War. They will have to account for food cards, millions in food cards that go to these marginal areas. They will have to account for additional CPEP contractors that they give out CPEP contracts to PNM friends and family. They will have to account, Madam Speaker, for the use of taxpayers' dollars for campaign use. And they don't want to do that.
Good point. Excellent. That is the issue.
Madam Speaker, this minister has also contributed to a dengue crisis we saw in this country earlier.
He and the mosquito.
Madam Speaker, regional corporations play a serious role in terms of keeping our environment clean. This government fired litter wardens in 2015. They cut the allocations for scavenging so that you have less days of garbage collection and you have illegal dumping sites being created. You have derelict vehicles. You have vacant lots breeding mosquitoes. When you have poor solid waste management, you have more mosquitoes breeding. When you have the regional corporations as well, who have been assisting over the years with spraying, with what they call the ULV spraying and so on, they have also been underfunded. And then the minister says, well, look, clean up your place. And they ask citizens to take responsibility. Clean it up and put the rubbish away. You put it out on the road, it's been weeks. My office is on Page Main Road in St. Augustine. That entire area there, weeks passing and the open tray truck doesn't pass and collect garbage, and that is a built-up area. And throughout the country, you have this situation. And then you know what they do? They threaten to fine citizens $3,500 if they don't clean up their premises. Yeah. I want them to go and visit all the premises that have old PTSC bus, the insect vector unit that have derelict vehicles.
Honourable Member, you have 2 more minutes of original speaking time available to you, and you're entitled to 10 more minutes to wind up your contribution if you wish.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
So proceed.
I will be taking my 10 minutes. I'll be taking all my time, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, another issue that I mentioned in terms of funding. Very quickly, the member for Point 14 yesterday spoke about a constituent of his from Cedros, which falls in the Superior region, that was begging him to get a road fixed, I think it was, from the Point 14 borough, something they want, a drainage issue attended, right? I want to point out to the minister, to the member, that Point 14 borough has a landmass of a land area of 25 square kilometers. Yes, Point 14 landmass is 25 square kilometers, and Superior's is 495 square kilometers. In terms of their population size, the population size in Point 14 is 20,000 persons. And in Superior, it's 87,000 persons. So they have about roughly 3 times more in terms of the population. But in terms of funding, you know what happens? Both regions get roughly about the same amount of money, right? Roughly. It varies from year to year. So you have a certain allocation, and when you really check it, and you have to check how much money goes to per Burgess per day, the per capita per day, Superior Corporation is $2 per day, and Point Fortin Borough is $9.94 per day. I'm just using that to show you the disparity in funding. And I hope that by sharing this information with you, you could advocate for your government to be more fair in the allocation of resources to regional corporations. I want to very briefly move now to a matter that is of concern to everybody, crime and security. This government has been very firm that crime and security is also the business of local government. We have spoken about stand your ground legislation. We have spoken about firearm users license for law-abiding citizens who qualify and who apply. We have spoken about municipal police patrols, comfort patrols for areas such as schools and so on and recreation grounds. But another issue that falls under regional corporations is gated communities. Where you have public roads and you want to make them private or you want to restrict access to the public, you must have the regional corporation intervene. Madam Speaker, I think it is prudent for each regional corporation to have a policy on gated communities. It should not be arbitrary, and it should be guided by the aligned ministry, which is the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. The very astute former Attorney General should be guiding that legal process. You cannot have a situation in Bamboo Settlement, which falls in St. Augustine constituency, but falls in Tunapuna Piako region, where persons will erect a booth, a security booth, and it is demolished because there's an illegal structure. And then you go in San Fernando, and you have a structure that has not received the approval of the San Fernando City Corporation, and the minister is there cutting the ribbon. Then that is blatantly unfair. Madam Speaker, I call on the Minister of Local Government to bring a uniform policy for gating communities, since there is an increase in the request from various communities to make their communities safer. I want to point him, Penal Debe Corporation has successfully done this by following the law, and maybe could follow an example from a UNC-led corporation to make communities safer. Madam Speaker, I mentioned earlier the situation where regional corporations are called on in schools. Because in my constituency, I have a school called Care Presbyterian. Madam Speaker, that school was almost complete when the People's Partnership was in government. It has come out of the program. It was growing up in bushes and so on. They clean it up. And I saw $5 million allocated in the previous budget, not the last one, previous one, $5 million. I get happy. You know what they do with this $5 million? They went and fixed the auditorium. And the school children are still in the old building. The sewer is erupting every day. The regional corporation have to go and suck out the sewer water. They have no access to the classrooms there. And I find that is, Madam Speaker, a sad reflection of what is happening elsewhere. And I want to highlight, because I mentioned that there are members on the other side who cannot speak out truthfully for their constituents. And I want to refer to an article, October 5th in The Guardian. Parents of Lafayette pupils issue ultimatum to ministry. In a correspondence from the Member of Parliament for Arima, MP Beckles wrote, despite the sad turning ceremony.
Remember, and that's what we started with. When you're quoting something, it is your words, so you're subjected to these rules. So you will have to amend it for it. Don't let me have to say that to any member again.
In the correspondence, and I quote, despite the sad turning ceremony on July 2015, which promised swift action, progress has been negligible. The lack of advancement has significantly heightened frustrations within the school community. On Friday, January 26, 2024, the PTA submitted a detailed list of concerns which I have enclosed with this correspondence. The documents highlight the critical need for fit-to-purpose school building. The prolonged delay impedes our students' educational development. The delay has led to, and hear this, Madam Speaker, the delay has led to repeated complaints and visits to my office, increasingly becoming a source of embarrassment and posing a risk to the reputation of both the Ministry of Education and the government. It is perceived as a failure to deliver on our promises in a timely and effective for educational infrastructure. That, Madam Speaker, sums up what is happening in all the schools throughout this country where the government has failed. And, Madam Speaker, accompanying that article is a photograph of the school where you have water gathering, bush growing, mosquitoes breeding. Madam Speaker, under the UNC government, we had delivery in education, and what we are having now is just a neglect throughout, not only in the secondary and primary schools, and I particularly want to point to safety where schools are concerned. The government has a responsibility to ensure that our students are safe, and we have to get back where we had previously under the member for Superior's government. You had comfort patrols around the schools. You must have that returning to have
Member, so somebody has an offending device, can they go out, get it under control, and they're entitled to return?
So I'm calling on the government to provide security measures to secure schools and school children and the areas surrounding schools. It is not only from the outside, but even from within, that you have young children who have been unfortunately falling prey to gangs. You have schools where teachers know of drugs being passed over the fence from the street. And if you have patrols there, that will not happen. You have cases where students have to lock themselves in a classroom because a shootout is taking place. On 2 occasions, children shivering under a desk. And I'm saying secure the areas around the schools on a full-time basis. Madam Speaker, in terms of secondary education, there are a lot of issues with secondary education. The enrollment in the secondary institutions has dropped, and this is in the SSIP, the Social Sector Investment Program report of this year. But I also identified the issues, and it has to do with the cut in funding from GATE. You have figures that while you have a reduced enrollment, what you also have is dropouts along the way because people cannot maintain to stay in these programs. And even when you had scholarships being given by the People's Partnership government, they gave 500 national scholarships and about 150 open scholarships and 350 additional scholarships. The PNM has now brought that down to 50 scholarships. So they also spoke about bursaries that they give. I know, Madam Speaker, of a particular, I will use one child as an example. She's a constituent, where her parent, she got a scholarship. We were all so happy for this child. She's very talented and so on. Got a scholarship, gone to Jamaica. And you know what happened? She has to come back to Trinidad because beginning of every semester, they are not getting the money on time. Her parents have to pay for rent for her over there and pay for her, and she cannot go to class until they make the releases. And they decided it's not making sense. So you know what she does? She come back home. She has to give up the scholarship. So I want to know how many of these students end up not getting the full benefit of the scholarship, although on paper they're saying, and they're down to 50 scholarships. So I wonder, it has to be less. Madam Speaker, the future of our children is not safe for this People's Partnership government. And the solution, we have given them 9 years, we are going into the 10th year. And the solution lies with the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I call on the members of the people who live in St. Augustine constituency as well as the entire Trinidad and Tobago. The solution is in your hands. Your vote in 2025 must be for the United National Congress. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.